afternoon. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Double Shot. Comes your way at 4 p.m. Eastern every weekday. And this one comes after Cowboys 20, Steelers 17. And yet so much uglier than the final score or even the weather that delayed the thing for an hour and change could possibly describe. I've been saying and writing for months now that the Steelers were not going to get by without a second WR1. And I was always careful to say it like that. I was always careful to use that terminology. It wasn't about getting a WR2, a second wide receiver, someone who could kind of fill that role, subservient to the main guy. It always had to be someone who could legitimately challenge and maybe even scare a little bit George Pickens. Now, through 4 games, for the most part, he was fine, both in terms of performance and I guess to an extent, poise. Not yesterday. What he did before the game, during the game, after the game, and even today, the day after the game, wholly unacceptable by routine NFL standards, not wide receiver diva standards, just normal NFL player standards. Unacceptable, and the kind of thing that would get you in a normal setting, benched, if not worse. But the Steelers aren't in that position. And you know who they have to blame for that? Because they didn't take seriously enough getting this other WR1. I'm going to read you a couple of dollar figures here that I have in relation to how much money they have, how much cap space they currently have. And I want it to the decimal point so that you get it. $10,537,226 is Omar Khan's current cap space. The amount of money that he spent on the teams right now, WR2, Van Jefferson, was $1,292,500. That's not taking, I don't want to call it the most important position in the NFL. Quarterback is that, obviously, but it's right up there. In the modern NFL, you don't go out there with one wide receiver. You don't go out there with, that stuff from the 1960s. I don't care if you have an Arthur Smith offense. I don't care the kind of offense that he ran in Atlanta that had the 2 tight ends as the second and third leading receivers or pass catchers on the Falcons roster. I don't care because the Falcons weren't any good, and the Falcons fired Smith in large part because he couldn't get that offense going. You need to have more than one wide receiver. Never mind the injury component. You need to have somebody else here. And the fact that Khan and the Steelers very apparently, put so many of their eggs in the Brandon Ayuk basket, that's not exactly a great sign either for how they'll conduct business going forward, because you have to have multiple options, but you have to make sure you take care of the most pivotal spots on the football field. They didn't do that. And you saw yesterday how that's going to play out. George made a fool of himself. And I'm saying that as somebody who kind of took a liking to this kid when he first got here. George puts the eye black on with the message that says always blanking open. Who's he doing that for? Who's he doing that? Who's he sending a message to? The quarterback or the head coach who's coddled him? The coordinator who's basically scripted an offense around him? Is he doing it to Justin Fields, who's been awesome with him? What are you trying to do there? And who, by the way, did this for him? Who on the team did that? And how does Tomlin look on the sideline and see him at some point and say, what are you doing? Go get back in that room and get that stuff off your face. What are you doing? Doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So what happens? He goes out on the field. George does. and continues to embarrass himself. Ball sails right through his hands. And way worse than that, because that's just a physical mistake, he's not running out routes. He's jogging through them. His teammates see this. His teammates hate it. One of his teammates, after the game, sees me in the locker room and kind of gives me one of these and tells me what they really think of him. And I reported that in my column on DK Pittsburgh Sports this morning. I reported how they actually are really, really, really peeved at this kid because he's hurting them. And they're right about that. They're right about that. The problem is he never should have been put in that position. You can go and get yourself a Zach Azzani, the current wide receivers coach, who's this real gung-ho, in-your-face kind of guy, and say, well, that'll get George going. No, it won't. No, it won't. There's going to be something like this. When you have someone who's this combustible, who's this, I guess you could call it egotistical if you're thinking of yourself so far ahead of the team. If you have someone like that, they're going to have their moments. And you didn't have an answer for it. Jefferson was out there for way more snaps than Pickens. Calvin Austin was out there for way more snaps than Pickens. And all of these guys, all of them, saw what the effect was on the overall offense. And a couple of them found a way to say what they wanted to say, in particular, Pat Freiermuth.
I don't think you didn't have a target in the first half, and I think George had maybe 1 or 2. You need to kind of get you guys the ball more.
Yeah, I mean, I trust the coaching staff what they're doing. You know, everyone can bitch and complain about getting lack of targets, but it's the stuff you do without the ball. And you know that's what leaders do, and that's what good teammates do. And I put my ass off regardless. So you know, the target's going to find me as long as I'm going out there doing my job, whatever's asking me to do. I'm going to go out there and do it the best I can.
You know what? Good for Pat. Good for Pat on every front. He had 0 targets in the first half, which, by the way, was ridiculous. You're throwing these deep balls to Darnell Washington and Connor Hayward. They should be going to 88. But instead of complaining, as he put it, actually he put it a little more colorfully than that, he used question on that subject to make his own statement about Pickens. No question that was about Pickens, by the way. You need a lot more of him and a lot less of Pickens. Problem is, you need a lot more wide receivers to neutralize the Pickens effect.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
Joined now by Chris Halleck, and if anybody's wondering why we will look and sound like this, the game ended at around 1 a.m., and our jobs just get started. We were up writing until, I was up until 6:45 a.m. I'm going to guess you were right around that same time.
Not quite as late or early, depending on how you look at it, but it was around 6 in the morning. Yeah, I mean, it was at a point in which I'm like, yeah, honey, you're going to have to take the kids to school. I'm just not waking up today.
Yeah, it becomes a family endeavor at that point. It's all better than watching that offense, though. You know, you and I are sitting there elbowing each other with every one of these 2nd and 9 runs, and then 3rd and 8 run right after the 2nd and 9 run goes nowhere. And what are you trying to do? I have not been critical of Arthur Smith really to this point in the season. And it's not just because of wins and losses. I've actually had his back, I feel like, even when things haven't gone super swimmingly on that side of the football. But that just felt stubborn. That just felt like we're more interested in exerting our Steelersness against you than it did trying to win the football game. And I don't get that.
I don't get it either.
Sports. Just win the game.
The one thing that I've been trying to not be too critical of Arthur Smith here. It's what 5 games in. Let's not throw the guy into the Allegheny just yet. but what's the one common denominator here among all of these offenses that we've had to watch here recently? It's been more about physicality than it has been about being clever. I would say this is probably more on Mike Tomlin's overall philosophy than actually Arthur Smith as an offensive coordinator, because Arthur Smith has shown what he can do as an offensive coordinator. He resurrected Ryan Tannehill's career. Derrick Henry's 2 best and most efficient seasons were when he was King Henry in Tennessee. That was when Arthur Smith was offensive coordinator. I don't think that Smith was a byproduct of because Derrick Henry decided to break out. I would think that Arthur Smith had a hand in Derrick Henry breaking out. And so you have a guy who's proven himself as an offensive coordinator. He's put out a top 5 offense with Ryan freaking Tannehill as the quarterback.
No, and Tannehill became one of the most efficient guys in the NFL there for a spell, and he really wasn't anything of the kind before that. And A.J. Brown was part of stretching the field too, so he was able to work with a big-time wide receiver and everything in Nashville. And yeah, so he comes here, and I don't think it's on Smith, if this is what you're getting at, to say, we're going to show them how macho we are. I'm going to, like, the one sequence that I kind of referenced there already, the 2nd and 9 run followed by the 3rd and 8 run. Remember what was on first down?
Yeah.
Took a shot. They took a shot downfield. It didn't work out. I think that was for Darnell, right? Darnell Washington? And okay, that's not a great call. If you're going to take a shot downfield with a tight end, how about trying 88, who got no targets in the first half? Pat Freiermuth didn't get used at all until the second half. And you throw that ball, and it's almost like Tomlin saying, hey, I gave you one. Now you got to run the ball. It's almost like it's a punishment for a lousy drill in Latrobe. And you know what I'm talking about when I say that, because he does that. He'll stop the practice and whatever. Well, these aren't practice games. And you're not trying to send a message. You're just trying to put up one more point than the other guys do. It doesn't seem like that
there's an offensive philosophy. It almost doesn't matter who's the offensive coordinator, that is about literally trying to be clever, be creative. It really does seem like it's more about trying to exert your will. And that's just not the NFL nowadays. I'm not saying that there's not a place to be physical. Shoot, man, look at Landon Roberts fly in and nearly win the game last night with that Troy Polamalu type play.
God bless him. He should have. Yes, he should have. You know, he was deserving of that. You know, and there were a couple other guys on the defensive side who deserved to be rewarded in the right way. Not many, but a couple. And then to see Deshaun Elliott, of all people, be the guy and he was on good coverage too. God, other side of the ball now. Back to the other side. Okay. Yeah. When you're talking about offense, Chris, you're talking about the stubbornness of the coordinator / head coach. Mostly the head coach, we agree. But you're also talking about the offensive line, which again didn't give Justin Fields any time, which again got no push. Not that I thought Najee Harris was going to seize upon holes anyway, but no push. What do you do? The offensive line, there isn't some
there's not. This has got to be something that's going to have to work itself out, unfortunately. And again, we're trying to not just automatically throw guys, into the river or, fire guys or whatever it is, but you got to kind of wonder, okay, what's going on here? Because this has, again, been a theme, the offensive line every single year over the past, this is like 3 years in a row now. Yeah.
It's the other common denominator. It started off
slow.
It's the other one.
They've started off, they've not been cohesive, but then as the season goes along, they eventually get better. It's like, these guys have talked about it, like you can't just be okay with starting off slow and think that you could turn it on in the second half and try to win. It's the same thing with the season. You can't just start off slow and think that you can just warm up as the season goes along and think that you're going to be in a great position. Now, granted, they got off to a 3-0 start, but here they are. They have regressed badly. Like, I don't have a lot of faith in going into Vegas of all places, with that terrible team, and think that they can actually win a football game. Yeah.
Why would you? There's no, after last night, there's no cause for it. The Colts were the worst defensive team in the league in terms of average yards per game allowed, and they shut down the Steelers' offense. Cowboys were that plus missing 3 really significant players on defense. Didn't matter. Shut him down like it was nothing. You know, the one guy who, and I referenced this in my opening today, who kind of gets away with nobody ever mentioning his name is Omar Khan. He traded Deontay Johnson and didn't replace him. Now, regardless of what you think of Deontay, you could have used him last night. Okay, you follow me on this? And you still haven't gotten yourself a true WR2, let alone the WR1 that I've wanted to see all along added to this lineup. And you're sitting on $10.5 million of cap space. I just, how does nobody ever seem to bring this up? It's a really big deal.
You don't have to look at what Deontay's doing in Carolina right now and think that, oh man, the Steelers could use, like, we know what Deontay could do. And we know that Deontay is a guy, at the bare minimum, he's a security blanket. He could be a guy that literally gets open every single snap and be a target that somebody, right.
And you don't go 3 for 12 on third down.
That
there's a lot to solve about this offense, I think. And I guess a start would be, I know a start would be getting Jaylen Warren, Cordero Patterson healthy again. That's obviously out of everybody's control. I think this even goes beyond personnel, though, because, how often is Pat Freiermuth not one of the tight ends when they trot 2 tight ends out there? Why is it Darnell Washington and Connor Hayward? Why is your first shot of the game to Connor Hayward? I'm not trying to dog Connor Hayward, but man, you just paid Pat Freiermuth nearly $50 million. And spent all summer having him run those routes. That's the part that people don't necessarily see. That this was what they were practicing for, was that Pat was supposed to be getting open in all different points of the field. And now all of a sudden you're like, let's try the other guys and see what they've got. Again,
I don't understand some of the personnel usage. There's just so that you could talk about offensive line, you could talk about personnel, you could talk about coaching decisions, you could talk about player execution or players not committing, aka George Pickens.
Okay, we did that. We did that too, but that's another problem that would get whatever. Listen, when we come back, J1Q.
Safety is a habit. Gun safety and responsible storage are no different. Help prevent gun accidents, misuse, and theft. Keep firearms safe and secure when not in use. For safe storage options, visit projectchildsafe.org.
For today's J1Q, that stands for Just One Question, we go to Ethan McClelland in Adrian, Michigan.
Hey, DK, here's my question. So why does Beanie Bishop have a job? It seems like every single time that the Cowboys' number 2 receiver, be it Tolbert, be it Turpin, I think was the other guy's name I noticed a lot. It seems like every time that they had a decent play, Beanie Bishop was the one in coverage. He's all right as run defense. I've noticed one play where he stopped a run pretty effectively, but otherwise every single play was him in coverage that got exploited. Why is he still in the lineup? Is there nobody else at all that can possibly do that, be a touch better than that?
No. I mean, not yet. Cam Sutton will be when he gets done serving his NFL suspension, and that's still at the midpoint of the season. I'm going to respectfully disagree with you, Ethan, that Bishop's been okay in run defense. I don't think he's been good at anything. And I saw him yesterday looking at, I guess I should say this morning, right? Not yesterday, like it was this morning. But I saw him just constantly still looking around, turning around toward Minkah Fitzpatrick, like, what should I do? Where should I be? Looking like this. And Minkah's pointing with his arms. And this was week 5. Just as I'm going to be critical of the Steelers, all the way up to Omar Khan for not having taken WR2 seriously. I don't know that they took, NB1, if you're talking about nickelback or a slot corner, seriously either. Bringing in Sutton was something they knew. I mean, they had to know was going to result in a suspension and significant missed time. So they're like, all right, well, what do we do? I don't know. Let's just eat the clock here for half a season. So, Bishop comes into camp as an undrafted free agent out of West Virginia. He didn't really have much competition. Mike Tomlin really didn't have much good to say about him. You might recall, for those of you who follow camp closely, when you think about the times in Latrobe, Tomlin would get asked constantly, what do you think about this? Did he show you something? Did he show you something? And Tomlin would be like, nope. He was trying to make a point with him. He was trying to turn him into the next Mike Hilton because that was the kind of relationship that he had with Hilton. Difference is Hilton made plays. Hilton made plays every day in camp. You could see that while Hilton was an incomplete product, that he had a sense for the game. He could sniff out the action. I haven't seen any of that with Beanie. I've seen a confused kid who looks very much like somebody who, by the time Sutton is back, will be exactly what he's going to end up being, which is, a special teams guy, if that. So I don't like the fact that the Steelers have assigned such an important role, and it is in modern football. It's not just where you put your worst corner the way it used to be. This is a slow adjustment on Tomlin's part, and I mean career adjustment on his part. And it's not okay. If you look at what Dak Prescott did, guys, Prescott just found him. Prescott just found Beanie and went at him. He went at him with the tight ends. He went at him with whatever wide receiver happened to be lined up there. And as a result, you throw everything out of whack, and specifically you throw Minka out of whack. On the big play that the Cowboys had down the left sideline, it was Dante Jackson in coverage, but it was Minka late getting over. What you might or might not have been able to see on television was that Minka was drawn to the middle on purpose by a route in which they knew that Beanie would get beat. Well, it turns out Dante thought he was going to have Minka for support. Minka was over here worrying about Beanie. Minka gets over there too late. It's not good. It's not good. I don't have a good thing to say about this. I don't have many good things to say at all about the Steelers on this particular day, but tomorrow's another day, and we'll see how that goes. Maybe they'll get a WR2 and an NB1 by then.